A 2-year-old disappeared in broad daylight. What happened next still haunts investigators today. It was one of those quiet, sticky afternoons that covered Tennessee in late August. The kind of heat that clings to your skin where even the buzz of insects feels far away and lazy. Around 2:15 in the afternoon, Daniel and Maria Alvarado pulled their tan station wagon into the I-40 rest stop just outside Cookeville. They had been driving west for hours, going home after visiting Maria's sister near Knoxville. In the back seat, their 2-year-old daughter Jenny was half asleep, holding a bright red balloon from a roadside restaurant they had stopped at earlier that morning. Maria would later say she almost decided not to stop. They were less than an hour from home, but Daniel needed a break and Jenny had started to cry. It was supposed to be 5 minutes. Stretch their legs, use the bathroom, grab a soda from the vending machine. Just 5 minutes, the rest stop was typical for that time. 2 picnic shelters, a concrete bathroom building, a handful of vending machines buzzing under a metal roof, and a narrow service road that vanished into a wall of pine trees. There were a few cars parked in the shade, and farther down, a blue pickup running near the trash cans. Nothing about it seemed strange. Maria took Jenny's hand as they walked toward the vending machines. Daniel followed, searching for quarters. A couple traveling through from Arkansas later remembered seeing Jenny walk a few feet ahead, laughing as the balloon floated above her in the sunlight. That was the last confirmed sighting of her alive. It could not have been more than 90 seconds. Maria turned her head for what she would describe as a blink. She opened her purse, asked Daniel what he wanted to drink, and when she looked back, Jenny was gone. No scream, no sound of bush moving, just gone. At first, Maria thought Jenny had wandered behind the vending machines or toward the picnic tables. She called her name, half laughing at her own fear, expecting a giggle back. When there was nothing, her voice changed. Louder, more scared. Within minutes, Daniel was running the edge, yelling into the trees. Another driver joined in, thinking maybe the child had followed a butterfly or stray dog. By 2:40, Maria's voice on the emergency call was pure terror. She was right here, she kept saying, right here. Her voice broke. The operator told her to stay put. Police were already on the way. When the first patrol car pulled in, the scene was strangely calm. No signs of a fight. No knocked over items, no tire marks, just a few people standing in shock, pointing in different directions. Officers began checking the area immediately, marking the space with yellow tape. A truck driver parked across the lot mentioned a man smoking near the bathrooms a few minutes before the disappearance. Tall with a baseball cap and a gray shirt. Another witness said she saw a blue pickup near the vending machines pull out fast, gravel flying behind it. She could not remember the license plate. The search grew quickly. Within an hour, police dogs were on the ground, their handlers yelling orders as they moved around the woods. A helicopter swept the area, its blades cutting the air while officers checked drainage pipes, ditches, and the edge of a nearby creek. Nothing, no smell trail, no tiny footprints in the soft dirt. It was as if Jenny had disappeared into the thick summer air. By 5 o'clock in the afternoon, the sun began to set, the light turning gold across the parking lot. News crews had arrived, reporters setting up cameras while officers tried to separate frantic volunteers from the crime scene tape. Maria sat on the curb holding Jenny's blanket, her hands shaking so hard that a police officer thought she might pass out. Daniel walked behind her, his eyes jumping from car to car as if hoping one of them would simply open and give his daughter back. Detectives from the Putnam County Sheriff's Office took statements, photographed tire tracks, and collected threads from the vending area. When they asked Daniel about the timeline, they noticed he had waited nearly 7 minutes before calling 911. Long enough, they said later, for doubt to take hold. He explained it over and over. He thought they would find her in the woods, that calling police too early would just make things worse. But in cases like this, seconds matter, and the delay became the first of many questions hanging over the family. As night fell, floodlights lit up the rest stop. Officers formed search lines reaching into the tree line, their flashlights moving through the bush. The heat broke into a heavy silence. The only sound was the hum of generators and the faint noise of radios. Around 10 o'clock at night, one of the searchers found something near the drainage ditch behind the lot. a small flat red balloon stuck in a bunch of weeds. It matched the one Jenny had been holding. Crime scene investigators checked the balloon and surrounding area, but found no fingerprints, no traces, nothing to suggest a struggle. The ground showed no sign of dragging or trouble. Even the dog seemed lost, circling once before losing the smell completely. By midnight, the rest stop had turned into a command center. News trucks lined the highway shoulder. Reporters spoke into microphones. About a missing child and a mystery on I-40, the word spread faster than any fact could keep up. At 2 in the morning, Maria was taken to the hospital after falling from exhaustion. Daniel stayed behind, refusing to leave the search teams. But by sunrise, there was still no sign. No clothes, no footprints, no witness who could say for certain what direction Jenny went. The next morning's headlines were harsh. 2-year-old vanishes from highway rest stop. The public wanted answers and the police had none. They questioned every registered driver who had been recorded in the area that afternoon. They tracked down the blue pickup's description to dozens of similar vehicles across 3 states. Every lead disappeared into nothing. Stories began to spread about trafficking rings, about cults, about a wandering stranger seen in nearby towns. Some guessed that Daniel himself had planned the kidnapping. Maria refused to believe any of it. She appeared on local TV the following week, holding up Jenny's photograph, begging anyone who might have seen something to come forward. Her voice was weak but steady. "She's just a baby," she said. "Somebody knows what happened." Days turned into weeks. The search area expanded to 20 miles. Volunteers searched nearby ponds and abandoned wells. Nothing, even the FBI's help failed to produce a single real clue. By early September, the rest stop had reopened to travelers, though few people wanted to stop there anymore. Locals began calling it the place where the little girl disappeared. Families driving through would speed past, eyes locked on the road, refusing to look at the picnic tables where police tape had once blown in the wind. Daniel and Maria eventually moved away from Cookeville, unable to handle the memories tied to that stretch of road. But the image stayed, a child holding a red balloon, sunlight bouncing off the car windows. A moment of normal life turned into a horror. Years later, one of the original police officers would describe it in a documentary. It was like the earth opened up and took her. "We searched every inch, but she was just gone." And that was the truth that haunted everyone who touched the case. There had been no sound, no fight, no witness who truly saw the moment it happened. Only silence stretching across the decades, as if the rest stop itself had eaten her whole. The years that followed Jenny Alvarado's disappearance moved in slow motion, measured not in months or seasons, but in the empty echo of unanswered calls and birthdays that came and went without candles. The case file, once fresh with urgency, began to fade beneath the weight of time and dust. For a while, the story stayed in the papers. 2-year-old vanishes from rest stop. It was the kind of headline that stuck in the back of people's minds for a few weeks before the next tragedy took its place. But for Maria Alvarado, time did not move forward. It circled the same point again and again, the 5 minutes that destroyed her life. In the years after 1982, Maria did what every parent in her situation was told to do: keep the story alive. She appeared on talk shows, stood under studio lights with photographs of Jenny pinned to her shirt, her voice shaking as she asked for help. She wrote letters to governors, to news stations, even to psychics who claimed they could see things others could not. Each time she ended with the same sentence: she was only 2. Daniel, meanwhile, slipped into the quiet spaces of pain, the kind that never speaks. He kept working construction for a few years, then stopped showing up completely. Friends said he would drive without purpose at night, sometimes pulling over at rest stops along I-40, sitting there for hours in silence, staring at the road. When he did come home, he would drink until he could not speak. By 1987, Maria and Daniel had separated, though neither ever filed for divorce. They simply stopped existing in the same life. The investigation itself began to fade. Detectives were moved to other cases. New priorities took over. Theories had run their course. Stranger kidnapping, trafficking, even the possibility of an animal attack, though no evidence ever supported it. Leads turned into stories, and stories turned into tales retold by strangers who swore they remembered seeing something. In truth, no one did. Still, every few years, a spark of hope would appear. Short-lived, but enough to make Maria's heart jump. In 1988, a truck driver in Arkansas reported a small girl wandering barefoot along a rest area at dawn. The description, light brown hair, green eyes, was close enough that the TBI sent an agent to check. The child turned out to be a runaway from Little Rock, not Jenny, in 1990. A waitress in New Mexico contacted police after serving a man with a quiet young girl she swore matched the photo she had seen years earlier on America's Most Wanted. DNA testing, still basic at the time, ruled it out. Each time, the phone calls came late at night. Each time, Maria would pack a small bag, ready to travel across the country at a moment's notice. And each time she returned home to an empty house. By the early 1990s, the Alvarado case had become a teaching example for young detectives, a reminder that not every disappearance ends with answers. The original lead detective retired. His replacement gave one final press meeting summarizing the case as inactive, pending credible new information. The word hurt cold and distant. Inactive meant forgotten. Then, in 1995, something strange happened. A former highway patrol detective named Frank Dillard, long since retired, was reviewing old kidnapping cases for a private project when the Alvarado file caught his attention. Dillard had a reputation for seeing what others missed. He spent months going through old reports, diagrams, and recorded witness statements. What struck him was how mixed up those early interviews were. One witness, the couple who had passed the family minutes before Jenny vanished, had described a blue pickup parked by the vending machines. But when pushed for details, they had added something that was never followed up on. The truck, they said, had what looked like government plates. At the time, it was dismissed as a mistake. But Dillard noted that the plates described matched a contractor format used by state maintenance crews in the early 80s. Then there was another statement, one taken from a truck driver who had stopped to use the bathroom just before the disappearance. He remembered a man in a gray shirt with a security badge. Though when detectives checked, the highway department confirmed no employees were scheduled at that site that day. Dillard underlined the line in red pen and wrote one word beside it, impersonator. He began rebuilding the timeline from scratch, creating a map of every vehicle recorded near exit 92 that afternoon. He drove the route himself, comparing views and distances, even talking to retired officers who had worked the scene. By his guess, Jenny disappeared within a 90-second window. Narrow, exact, and disturbingly smooth. Whoever took her, he told a local reporter in a short-lived interview, knew exactly what he was doing. Dillard believed Jenny had not wandered into the woods or been taken by chance. He thought that her kidnapper had pretended to be a maintenance worker or a highway official, someone the family would not think twice about seeing at a rest stop. He wrote a report planning to present his findings to the TBI, but before he could deliver it, he suffered a minor stroke at home. His daughter later found the case notes stacked neatly on his desk. The top page marked with a coffee stain and the words "Blue Truck Fake Badge." Check 1982 contracts. Without Dillard to push it forward, the case went silent again. The file was boxed up and stored among hundreds of unsolved cases labeled inactive child abduction. Another generation of officers joined the department, unaware of the little girl whose photograph once hung above the command desk. Maria never stopped writing letters. She mailed one to the TBI every Christmas, thanking them for still remembering Jenny, even though she knew most of the people she wrote to no longer work there. Her faith in finding her daughter alive had faded, replaced by a quieter belief that Jenny had been taken by someone pretending to help. In her dreams, the man's face was always blurred, but the setting never changed. Headlights cutting through fog, the faint sound of tires on gravel, and Jenny's voice calling from somewhere just out of reach. Sometimes she would wake in the middle of the night, convinced she heard a child's laughter from the yard. She would rush to the window, heart pounding, only to find the street still and empty. Over the years, those moments became both her punishment and her comfort. As long as she could still hear her daughter in her dreams, Jenny was not gone entirely. By the turn of the millennium, the Alvarado case had become a ghost story whispered among local truck drivers about a rest stop where people claimed to hear a child crying near the trees, where headlights sometimes dimmed for no reason as cars passed through. None of it was real, but for those who remembered, the silence that followed the case felt haunted in its own way. Maria once told a reporter softly that she did not think time could solve what happened. "Time just buries things," she said. "It does not fix them." And for the next 2 decades, that is exactly what time did. It buried the truth beneath miles of road, under years of lost interest and forgotten paperwork, until one night, years later, a truck driver's dashcam would record something strange on that same stretch of highway and bring Jenny's name back into the light. By 2015, the place where Jenny Alvarado disappeared no longer existed. The rest stop at exit 92 had been torn down years ago, its cracked picnic tables and fading road buried beneath a widened stretch of Interstate 40. What once was a quiet pull-off lined with pines had become just another blur of concrete for the thousands of cars that sped by each day. For most, it was nothing more than a number on a green highway sign. For the few who still remembered the story, it was a place best avoided, a ghost of the past sealed under fresh pavement. But the past has a strange way of coming back. In the fall of 2016, a retired truck driver named Bill Morton made a post on an online forum called Truckers Rest, a digital hangout for long-haul drivers sharing stories from the road. His post was not meant to go viral. He titled it simply "Something Strange on I-40 near Cookeville." Morton said he had been organizing old dashcam clips he had saved from his years on the road when he stumbled across one that bothered him. The footage was grainy, captured in 2015 during a late-night drive through Central Tennessee around 2 in the morning on an empty service road. Parallel to I-40, his camera picked up something unusual. A teenage girl walking barefoot along the shoulder. She appeared out of the darkness, lit up for just a few seconds by his headlights. Her hair hung loose and tangled. She wore an oversized shirt and shorts that looked torn. Her steps unsteady, almost careful, as if she were listening for something behind her. For a brief moment, she turned her head toward the passing truck. In that flicker of light, her face was visible, pale, frightened, and much too young to be alone at that hour. Then she was gone, swallowed again by the dark. Morton wrote that he had not thought much of it at the time. He had seen runaways before, kids escaping something, hitchhikers, people wandering without purpose on the edges of the interstate, but something about this girl bothered him when he watched the footage again. She was not moving like a runaway. She looked hunted. Within hours, other drivers responded. Some said they had seen strange things on that stretch too. Figures in the fog, shadows near the tree line, the occasional barefoot stranger walking the shoulder. A few dismissed it as exhaustion or the tricks of night driving, but when Morton uploaded the 20-second clip itself, the tone of the discussion changed completely. The video spread quickly beyond the forum. Someone cross-posted it to Reddit on the Unresolved Mysteries subreddit. The thread's title read, "Who is the girl in this 2015 dashcam footage recorded near the site of the 1982 Alvarado disappearance?" At first, it was treated like a curiosity, a ghost story for the internet age. But then users began comparing still frames from the video to old photographs of Jenny Alvarado. The similarity was chilling. The facial structure, the eyes, even a faint scar near the left eyebrow, something Jenny had from a childhood fall, matched almost perfectly. One user overlaid the images, lining up the features. When they posted the composite, it exploded across social media. Within days, local news outlets picked it up. The clip aired on Channel 5 in Nashville under the headline, "Mystery Girl on I-40. Could she be the child who vanished 35 years ago?" The anchor's voice was measured, doubtful, but the meaning was clear. It might sound impossible, but what if it was not? The Cookeville Police Department issued a short statement saying they were aware of the footage, but had no reason to believe it was connected to any open investigation. They suggested the girl was likely a runaway or possibly part of a human trafficking case. "We see these kinds of reports often," one sergeant told a reporter. It's probably nothing. But it did not feel like nothing. The clip had a strangeness that no one could explain. The girl's movements, her backward glances, the brief moment when her head turned toward the light. It did not look fake. It looked like fear. Within a week, the Tennessee Bureau of Investigation reopened the Alvarado file, officially citing new potential evidence in the disappearance of Jennifer Alvarado. For the first time in decades, Jenny's name appeared again in official records. A forensic video analyst from the TBI's Digital Crimes Unit began working on the footage, improving it frame by frame. Despite the low quality, they managed to sharpen several key details. The girl was walking along a narrow service road that had once bordered the old rest area. In one frame, faint light reflected off something metal behind her, barely visible, but enough to catch the analyst's attention. When the footage was stabilized and contrast improved, the reflection became clear. A side mirror. Someone else was on that road. Behind the girl, almost perfectly hidden by darkness, was the faint outline of a white van sitting on the shoulder. The van's headlights were off, its front just visible under the dash cam's high beams for 2 or 3 frames. The vehicle had no visible license plates. The discovery sent a chill through the room. The van had not been visible to the naked eye during the original recording, but there it was, frozen in a fraction of a second, undeniable. Investigators compared the van's shape to historical records, cross-checking models from the late 90s and early 2000s. It was consistent with a Ford Econoline, the same type of vehicle frequently used by independent contractors and maintenance crews. For many inside the Bureau, it was a strange echo of the earliest details from the 1982 reports. The mention of a man in a gray shirt, the fake badge, and the unknown blue pickup with unusual license plates. What if, someone suggested, the blue truck was not the only vehicle involved? What if the man who took Jenny had used multiple work vehicles over time? Each one untraceable, each one legitimate looking enough to avoid suspicion. When the TBI notified Maria Alvarado, she was 71 years old, living quietly in a small apartment in Franklin, Tennessee. She had not spoken publicly about her daughter in nearly 2 decades. The news unsettled her, but she agreed to view the footage. Witnesses later described the moment. The lights dimmed, the video looped on a monitor, and as the image of the barefoot girl appeared, Maria's hand went to her mouth. "That's her walk," she whispered. "That's Jenny." The Bureau could not confirm it. Not yet. But the similarity was enough to restart an investigation that had been sleeping for most of a lifetime. Detectives began interviewing former highway workers who had worked in the area in the early 1980s. One name came up more than once. A subcontractor with a history of discipline problems who had worked on road maintenance near Exit 92 the week Jenny disappeared. His records were messy and he had died years earlier in Oklahoma. But what caught their attention was a faded staff photo attached to his file. The man wore a gray shirt with a badge, a circular patch that did not match any known department uniform. As the analyst continued to improve the video, one final detail emerged. When the van's reflection flickered across the side mirror, there was something faintly visible on its hood, a partial word barely readable under decades of poor quality. It read Fowler's followed by a smudge. The name meant nothing to most of the team, but to one retired investigator reviewing the footage that week, it stopped him cold. He remembered the name from a maintenance contract buried deep in the old 1982 paperwork, Fowler's Creek Maintenance Depot. The company had shut down in the late 90s, around the same time the dashcam's timestamp was recorded. That connection would soon send the investigation in an entirely new direction. One that would dig up a secret buried in plain sight for more than 3 decades. Every case on this channel is not just a story. It's weeks of research, digging through real records, and piecing together lives that were lost. Each episode takes days of investigation and long nights chasing the truth. We do this because these stories matter, and someone out there still deserves to be remembered. If you want us to keep uncovering the truth behind these mysteries, please like, subscribe, and tell us in the comments which part of today's case hit you the hardest. Your support keeps us going. Claude is AI and can make mistakes. Please double-check responses. And if you would like to watch more solved cold cases, the links are waiting for you in the description below. Now, let's get back to the case. When the Tennessee Bureau of Investigation reopened the Alvarado file in early 2017, few of the agents assigned to it had been alive when Jenny vanished. The case was older than most of them, a name buried in the files under hundreds of missing child reports from the 1980s. But the dashcam video changed everything. It was the first real lead in 35 years, something they could see, study, break down. For weeks, the digital forensics team looked through each frame, searching for anything that might explain who that barefoot girl was and why a van had been following her. It was a young analyst named Rebecca Nash who first noticed a connection buried in the old staff records. She was cross-checking highway maintenance contracts from the summer of 1982, when one name appeared repeatedly: Louis R. Baines on paper. He was listed as a temporary security contractor for a private maintenance firm that helped with state rest area repairs. But something about his employment file did not sit right. There was no driver's license number attached. No listed address, just a post office box out of Birmingham, Alabama. When Nash ran his name through federal records, she found an arrest from 1980 in Jefferson County: kidnapping and unlawful imprisonment of a minor. The details were disturbing. Baines had served 2 years before being released on parole. His victim, a 12-year-old girl, had been found alive after escaping from a makeshift storage shed behind a warehouse where Baines worked. After his release, he vanished from Alabama's parole system. No forwarding address, no follow-up employment records, just gone. Yet there he was, showing up 2 years later under a state contract in Tennessee, working less than 30 miles from where Jenny disappeared. When agents dug deeper, they discovered Baines had access to several work vehicles, including a white Ford van registered to his contracting company. A faded logbook from 1982 listed multiple site visits that week, one of them at exit 92 I-40 Cookeville. No one had ever cross-checked those logs back then. The Bureau sent a request for additional files through the Alabama Department of Corrections. What came back painted an even darker picture. In 1983, roughly a year after Jenny's disappearance, Baines legally changed his name to Harold L. Beckett and got new identification documents in Missouri. Under that identity, he worked various maintenance and cleaning jobs across the Midwest throughout the 1980s and early 1990s. Then suddenly in the summer of 1999, his trail ended in rural Oklahoma, where death records showed he had died of a heart attack at 54, no next of kin, no obituary. It was a disturbing timeline, one that placed him alive and moving for nearly 2 decades after Jenny vanished. Meanwhile, digital analysts continued breaking down the dashcam video. The footage that had restarted the case was only 20 seconds long, but every frame carried potential proof. Using advanced image stabilization, they managed to improve the background behind the girl. That's when they noticed it. A worn sign partially visible in the corner of the frame. The letters were faded, but the words could still be read. Fowler's Creek Maintenance Depot. The name sparked immediate recognition among the team. It was a small state maintenance facility located off the same stretch of I-40, shut down in 1998 after the highway expansion. It had been abandoned for nearly 2 decades. If the girl in the dashcam clip was walking past that sign, the footage could not have been recorded in 2015. The depot had been torn down years before. Suspecting a technical error, analysts examined the data embedded in the video file. They discovered the dashcam's internal clock, likely due to software damage, was off by exactly 18 years. That meant the footage timestamped June 14, 2015. Had in reality been captured on June 14, 1999. The realization sent a shock wave through the investigation. For months, they had been searching for a modern-day survivor. Now, the truth was far more disturbing. The dashcam had not captured a girl walking the highway recently. It had captured the final moments of a missing child decades earlier. Once the timeline shifted, everything else fell into place with terrifying precision. In 1999, Louis R. Baines, by then living as Harold Beckett, was still employed as a traveling maintenance contractor, moving from state to state, repairing highway signs. He owned a white van that matched the one seen sitting in the dashcam reflection. Financial records obtained from an old credit union account showed fuel purchases along I-40 in early June 1999, with the last transaction recorded near Cookeville. 12 days later, he was pronounced dead in Oklahoma. Investigators thought that on the night of June 14th, the dashcam mounted on another driver's truck had unknowingly recorded Jenny in the final hours of her life. She would have been 19 then, no longer the toddler who vanished from the rest stop, but a young woman who had likely spent years hidden from the world. The idea alone unsettled everyone working the case. For 35 years, she had been classified as an abducted child. Now, it seemed she had survived, at least for a while, and the world had passed her by. Forensic analysts returned to the video with renewed urgency. They slowed it down to 1/8 speed, breaking apart every pixel. When the girl turned her head toward the truck's headlights, they noticed something shining on her wrist, a small metal bracelet. Maria had mentioned decades earlier that Jenny had worn a thin silver bracelet engraved with her initials. Another frame showed the girl's lips moving as though she were speaking. The words were impossible to hear, but a lip-reading specialist believed she said one thing: "Help me." The agent stared at the footage in silence. Somewhere out there, the truth of what happened to Jenny had been sitting on an old hard drive for nearly 20 years. Wrongly dated, wrongly labeled, forgotten. They pulled the registration history of the truck that recorded the footage, discovering it had belonged to a shipping company that went bankrupt in the early 2000s. The company's items, including the dash cams, were sold off, one of which eventually ended up in the hands of Bill Morton, the retired trucker who unknowingly brought back the investigation decades later. It was almost too much to process. A chance discovery of damaged footage from a dead camera had become the key that time itself had lost. When the agents presented their findings to the bureau chief, the room fell silent. The sequence of dates was clear. Baines had kidnapped Jenny in 1982, lived under a false identity for 17 years, and died in the same year the footage was recorded. The girl seen walking barefoot along the service road was not a random runaway. She was Jenny Alvarado, alive, terrified, and on the edge of being free. The investigators could only guess the circumstances that led her there. Maybe she had escaped. Maybe he had left her when his health began to fail. Maybe that walk along the road was her first moment of freedom in years. But by the time anyone found the footage, both of them were already gone. Late that night, Rebecca Nash sat alone reviewing the video again, frame by frame, the background noise. The brief flash of headlights, the ghostly flicker of the white van in the mirror, it all told the same story. The world had recorded Jenny's final walk and then unknowingly looked away. The official report was changed one final time. Subject last seen alive June 14, 1999, near former Fowler's Creek Maintenance Depot. Likely kidnapper identified after death as Louis R. Baines, deceased. It was not closure, not really. It was proof that the truth had been hiding in plain sight for decades, frozen inside a piece of damaged data. And though the case now had a name, a face, and a time of death, one question remained. If that dashcam recorded her alive in 1999, where had she been for the 17 years before that? By early 2017, winter had begun to loosen its grip on central Tennessee. The pines surrounding the old Fowler's Creek site stood silent, their roots threading through soil that had not been disturbed in decades. What was once a modest maintenance depot, 2 storage sheds, a drainage ditch, and a gravel service road was now an overgrown patch of wilderness swallowed by time. No signs, no fences, no memory of what had been there. But the investigation had finally led them back to this forgotten place. And the team that arrived that morning knew it was not just another dig. Armed with the corrected data from the dash cam footage, TBI investigators and forensic scientists began searching the land around the remains of the old depot. Using historic aerial photos, they matched the terrain with what had once been the road seen in the 1999 footage. The GPS coordinates lined up almost perfectly. What had once been the Fowler's Creek signpost was now a rusted metal pole lying half buried in brush. To anyone else, the site looked like nothing more than abandoned land. But to the agents standing there, it felt heavy, like something was waiting to be found. They started with a careful grid search. Ground-penetrating radar swept slowly over the area, passing back and forth across the muddy ground. For hours, the screen showed nothing but the uneven shapes of rocks and tree roots. Then around mid-afternoon, one of the technicians noticed a small oddity about 30 feet from the storm drain. A patch of soil with unusual pressure patterns. It was not large, maybe 2 feet by 3, but it was clear something had been buried there. When the digging began, the team worked quietly, almost carefully. Each layer of dirt was checked slowly. The first item they uncovered stopped everyone in their tracks. A small piece of faded blue fabric, torn and stiff with age. Forensic specialists quickly sealed it in a bag. Under magnification, the fibers were later confirmed to match those of a children's sweater made in the early 1980s. The same brand Maria Alvarado remembered dressing Jenny in on the day she vanished. Encouraged by the find, the team continued digging deeper, expanding the area by a few feet. The soil beneath was damp and pressed down as though it had been moved long ago and settled again. After nearly 4 hours of careful work, the remains began to surface. They found pieces first, small bones scattered unevenly in the dirt. Then, as they widened the trench, the full outline took shape. A shallow grave no more than 2 feet deep. The remains belonged to a female approximately 16 to 18 years old. The skeleton was mostly intact, though the skull showed evidence of blunt force trauma. There were no personal items, no jewelry, no shoes, only the remains of a torn shirt and a rusted zipper. Even before the DNA results came back, the team knew what they had found. When the confirmation arrived from Quantico weeks later, the name on the report erased any remaining doubt. Jennifer Alvarado confirmed the match. The announcement sent a wave through the small unit that had been quietly chasing her story for months. For them, it was proof. For Maria, it was the phone call she had both begged for and feared for 35 years. Investigators rebuilt the likely sequence of events. The evidence suggested that Jenny had been kept alive for a long period after her kidnapping. Forensic analysis of the bone density and dental structure placed her death between the ages of 16 and 18. Claude is AI and can make mistakes. Please double-check responses. The trauma to her skull was consistent with a single powerful blow, likely caused with a blunt object. There were no signs of multiple injuries or a long struggle, suggesting that her death may have been sudden. Nearby soil samples revealed trace levels of motor oil and fuel residue consistent with long-term vehicle storage. Analysts thought that the white van, the same one seen in the dashcam video, had been parked near that site for years, possibly used as a temporary living space or holding area. The windows had likely been covered. The van moved from place to place along rural routes. Invisible among the hundreds of service vehicles that traveled the interstate each year. One retired TBI agent later admitted he hid her in plain sight. Every driver on that road probably passed her and never knew. Investigators pieced together what they believed was the final chapter of Jenny's captivity. When Louis Arbanes, living under the name Harold Beckett, began experiencing health issues in 1999, he may have realized he could not continue moving her undetected. The footage captured by the dashcam that Summer likely showed Jenny moments after she escaped. She was confused, barefoot, and trying to get away from him. The white van trailing her was not random. It was his. And at some point after that recording, he caught up with her. The following week, agents returned to the Fowler's Creek site to complete the recovery. Every bone, every piece of clothing, every scrap of evidence was recorded and sealed. A temporary memorial was placed beside the dig area. A single red balloon tied to a marker stake, its ribbon shaking in the cold wind. When the remains were released to the family, the news reached Maria quietly. The Bureau did not make a public statement. There were no press conferences, no reporters waiting on her doorstep this time. Just a call, a voice on the other end, confirming that the search was finally over. Maria sat in silence for nearly a full minute before answering. "She's been alone long enough," she said. The funeral took place in March 2017, held in a small cemetery just outside Franklin. It was not open to the public. A handful of relatives and former investigators attended, standing in a circle beneath gray skies. Maria did not want flowers or speeches. She only asked that Jenny be buried with her childhood blanket, the one she had kept folded in a cedar chest for 35 years. For the investigators, the case had closed, but the weight of what they had uncovered stayed with them. They knew they would likely never find out what Jenny's life had been like during those lost years. There were no diaries, no belongings, no trace of her beyond the pieces of clothing and the brief moment of video preserved on a damaged dash cam. Yet in some strange way, the evidence that survived told its own story. The worn sweater that had once fit a toddler's shoulders. The growth markers in her bones showing a life extended, however trapped. The final walk along the road, caught by chance in the glow of a truck's headlights. All of it came together to reveal a truth that had been buried both literally and symbolically beneath the pines of Tennessee. For the first time since 1982, there were answers. Not closure, not peace, but answers. Jenny had been found. Her story finally pulled from the silence that had swallowed her. But as Maria stood at her daughter's grave that spring morning, watching the red balloon rise and drift toward the clouds, she could not help but wonder about one haunting question that even the investigation could not answer. Why had Jenny been kept alive for so long? And what had she endured in all those years no one could account for? The question would follow her for the rest of her life, a quiet ache that no truth could heal. But at least for the first time in 35 years, Jenny was home. By the summer of 2017, the case that had haunted Tennessee law enforcement for more than 3 decades was officially closed. The Alvarado file, thick with faded reports, handwritten notes, and photographs long gone yellow, was finally sealed for the last time. For investigators who had inherited the cold case, it was both an ending and a reckoning. Every detail, every missed connection had been put back together into one chilling, complete truth. Through months of cross-checking, forensic reconstruction, and digital analysis, the Bureau pieced together the story as best as they could. It began in 1982 at a rest stop that no longer existed. A man wearing a reflective vest and carrying a clipboard had approached the Alvarado family under the disguise of a state maintenance worker. He was calm, non-threatening, and polite, someone who looked official enough that no one would question his presence. Investigators believe that when Maria turned her attention to the vending machines, that was when Baines acted. He likely lured Jenny toward his truck using the balloon she had been holding, or perhaps something as simple as a toy in his pocket. Within seconds, she was gone. Over the next several years, he moved constantly, taking temporary jobs, repairing signs, resurfacing roads, clearing brush along highways that stretched from Alabama to Oklahoma. His white van was a constant presence, but it blended easily among hundreds of similar state vehicles. He had mastered invisibility through being normal, hiding in plain sight while transporting a child no one was looking for anymore. Forensic analysts later confirmed that Jenny's clothing fibers recovered from the grave near Fowler's Creek carried trace amounts of industrial lubricant used in older highway maintenance machinery. It was the same substance found on Baines's old work gloves, preserved in a storage unit his landlord had sold off after his death. Even in death, his tools told the story he never confessed to. They now knew the dashcam clip, the grainy 20-second video that brought back everything, had been recorded in 1999, the same year Baines died. Investigators thought it might have captured one of Jenny's final attempts to escape. Forensic facial analysis matched her features to childhood photos with near certainty. In that footage, she looked terrified but alert, aware of the danger behind her, still fighting to survive after 17 years in captivity. The haunting detail was not just what the camera saw, but how it survived. The dash cam that captured Jenny's image belonged to a shipping company that had gone bankrupt in the early 2000s when its fleet was sold off. One of the trucks and its old recording system was sold at auction. The video file stored on an outdated hard drive sat unnoticed for nearly 2 decades until Bill Morton's grandson reformatted it while reusing the device. During that process, the corrupted data came back, broken, distorted, but intact enough to be recognized. It meant that a piece of technology that did not even exist when Jenny disappeared had become the witness that human eyes never were. That small corrupted file had waited silently for years, locked inside outdated hardware until it was rediscovered by chance. For investigators, that realization carried a strange kind of sadness. The answers had always been out there, buried not just beneath the soil, but within forgotten data, misplaced evidence, and moments lost to time. And when it all finally surfaced, the truth arrived too late for justice. Baines was dead. Jenny was gone. All that remained was the reconstruction of a nightmare and the faint comfort of knowing what had really happened. Maria received the final report in person. She was 71, frail but sharp, her voice still steady after years of silence. The lead investigator met her at her apartment, carrying a thin folder that summarized 3 decades of searching. He read the findings aloud as gently as he could. Her daughter had been found, her identity confirmed, her death classified as murder. It was the closure the world called peace, but it did not feel peaceful. Weeks later, Maria made the quiet drive to where the rest stop once stood. The site had been completely rebuilt. New road, a fresh parking lot, a modern bathroom building with automatic lights and clean signs. Families came and went, children laughing, travelers stretching their legs on their way to someplace else. No one there knew what had happened on that same ground 35 years earlier. Maria walked slowly to the tree line, stopping near a young pine where she could see the interstate curve in the distance. From her purse, she pulled a single red balloon, the same color her daughter had been holding the day she vanished. She tied it to the lowest branch and stepped back, watching it sway in the breeze. Her voice, soft but steady, carried just enough for the person filming nearby to hear. "She's home now." For a moment, she stayed there, her hand resting on the tree trunk, as if holding herself to the spot where her life had split in two. There were no reporters this time, no flashing cameras, no microphones, just the low hum of traffic and the rustle of pine needles. It was over, not in the way she once prayed it would be, but in the only way time allows. When the Bureau filed its final summary report that fall, one line stood out among the rest. It read, "Case resolved through digital evidence recovered in 2016, probable cause confirmed. Through forensic comparison and supporting data. No further action pending?" The note was cold, detached, but between its lines lay the kind of irony that no one missed. In 1982, there had been no security cameras at rest stops. No digital logs, no GPS tracking, no data storage. A child had vanished in plain daylight, and the world simply lost her. But in 2017, technology, something her parents could not have imagined, had remembered what everyone else had forgotten. For the investigators who had lived with the case, it was both miraculous and tragic. The truth had finally been found, but it arrived without punishment, without answers to the questions that still haunted them. Why had she been kept alive for so long? Did she ever try to reach out? Did anyone ever unknowingly see her and look away? There would never be answers to those questions, only the knowledge that somewhere, somehow, a single piece of forgotten footage had spoken for her. Maria passed away 2 years later. Her obituary mentioned a daughter who had been reunited with her mother in peace. No details, no mention of the rest stop, no reference to the case that had once gripped the state. For her family, the story was over. But for those who had studied the file, it lingered like unfinished business. A reminder that some mysteries do not stay buried forever. They wait. Sometimes for years, sometimes for decades, and sometimes they are found not by the people who remember, but by the machines that never forget. The story of Jenny Alvarado ended the way so many do, not with justice, but with truth. A truth pieced together from broken images, scattered files, and the relentless determination of those who refused to let her name fade away. And as that red balloon drifted upward against the Tennessee sky, there was finally a sense of stillness. The kind that comes not from victory, but from knowing that after 35 years, the silence had finally been broken.